if Red Bull can run wingsuit skydivers through controlled airspace with no radio and no transponder and be approved, I think you'll be all right. There's quite a lot of planning involved. You can't just go, ooh, I reckon I could cross there, right? And people look at it and go, Jesus Christ, that's terrifying. And to be honest, when you're sat over the middle of that sea and you can't see land either side of you, like it's not a pleasant feeling. Oh well, you got an engine, so yeah, great. When that engine is sat at minus 25 degrees and not getting above minus 10, you know, that engine, a really, really cold engine, are you going to want to rely on that to get you out of the crap? No. And I've had issues in the past with cold engines, so I trust them 0%, which is why every time we've done an engine burn, we've been on glide to an airfield.
Good evening, aviators, and welcome back to the Soaring Show. The show has changed a bit, so instead of getting one video with 3 segments, you now get one video on the weather, one video on the news, and one video with the interview. And this is the interview video. In this video, I spoke to Gill and Geoff Burtenshaw on the recent flight to Northern Ireland from Wales in mid-March, how that flight came to be, and some of the behind the scenes of how to organise a flight like that, because obviously you have to involve ATC. For those of you who somehow don't know who Chris is, he's a famous UK pilot. He's the chief flying instructor at Denby, which is a famous gliding club in the UK. And he's known for his enterprising flying. He's got a lot of very exciting plans and makes the most of a flying day. And Geoff was on holiday at Denby and made the mistake, or was it the mistake, of asking Chris if he could fly with him, and Chris offered to take him over to Northern Ireland. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. While you were flying, there were posts going left, right, and centre. There were group chats. I saw messages popping up saying, oh, Chris is doing something exciting. So I think I messaged you just as you landed. I think we had a poll up asking if we should invite you over for another interview, Chris, despite the fact that you were on our show several times recently. To see, you know, if anybody wanted to hear you talk. And I think there were something like 130 yeses. It was one of the most interacted posts we had recently. So,
and I was one of the only people that said no.
Yes, actually, yeah, you and 2 other people. And I think the other 2 people may have done it by accident.
Mine wasn't an accident.
So, this flight has been all over the place. It's been over WeGlide. I saw the BGA shared it. Everyone shared it. So do you want to walk us through where did this flight come from? Did you have it planned? What was the thinking behind?
So I've had the island on my radar for a while. Probably I was doing some towing there in the summer last year and got a look at the land and saw there's got some nice ridges and things like that, and I could see quite clearly that in some kind of easterly southeasterly that there should be some wave soaring there. I've got, this sounds like I'm changing subject slightly, but it'll lead back. I've got a few wacky flights planned where I need a good relationship with air traffic control to make happen, basically airspace clearances. Now, what I set up last year was something called an airspace coordination notice with the CAA, with NATS. CAA, and ACM. Now, this is basically like filing a flight plan, but in more detail. So I set this up last year, and basically although you can't see it, the airspace between North Wales and Northern Ireland is there's a load of Class C airspace, and it's quite a busy airway going between Ireland and Manchester, Liverpool, and other people use it as well. So it's quite a busy bit of airspace for gliders just to go in. Like it takes pre-planning. So I got all that approved last year, and I've been waiting on the day to use it and get into Northern Ireland. Now on this flight, we didn't go that far. I've got much bigger plans for this sort of thing. So I saw this day coming probably 3 or 4 days in advance, and to be honest, the forecast stayed the same throughout the whole thing, and I could see that it was going to be really good in North Wales, which it was, but it was going to be a bit soft in Northern Ireland. But they were showing wave, and I was reading the Teffys every day over there and trying to work out how good it would be. And my theory was that we'd easily get high enough in Wales to jump the gap to Northern Ireland. And once we got over there, then it should be working well enough for us to then cross that northern water crossing, which is, I think, about 70k, something like that, back into Scotland. And I knew that I wanted to go further north, and I still do, on the right sort of day. But this day, that wasn't going to happen. So this flight basically panned out exactly how I was expecting it to, but it was a bit more of a challenge than I was hoping for. That sort of makes sense. And we'll go into more details later on. But yeah, so it's been in my mind for half a year or so.
And how do the CAA take these sort of plans? So when you present to them saying, "Hey, I've got this crazy idea," what do they ask for?
I won't show you the document because I don't really want to show you what I've got planned, because it's really embarrassing when it doesn't happen. So I've stopped doing that now. Although I don't have, it's not that it won't happen. It's just that it hasn't happened yet, and it's bloody annoying. Anyway, so what does it look like? So I think it was Mike Fox that put me in touch with the right person, and basically there's the right person to the CAA, and I had a phone call with him initially, and he said. And I said, look, this is what I want to do, but I'm going to need all sorts of airspace clearances to do it. And I said, look, I've got a radio transponder. I'm squawking, talking. I can do whatever you need me to do. How's that? Is it possible to do this sort of thing? And he basically came back to me and said, well, if Red Bull can run wingsuit skydivers through controlled airspace with no radio and no transponder and be approved, I think you'll be all right. So yeah, that was good. So basically, I communicate with one or two people with the CAA. They produce a document for me with rough heights, positions where I'm going to be, and where I'm going to be crossing to. And I've got two other ACNs, like documents with this that I'm ready to click go on as well. They produce this document because I know exactly where I'm going to be in certain wind, in wave conditions, and I know exactly where I'm going to go, so it makes that easier. They send it around all the relevant ATC units, so Scottish. In this case, you've got Belfast and things like that. So there's lots of ATC units that look at it, and if they've got any problems with it, then they will say. And I'm not aware of anyone objecting to any of these. They come back to me and they go, "Yep, there you go, it's all being approved." And then I give them a little bit of warning for when I want to activate this flight plan, we'll call, but it's ACN. And in this case, I think I got in touch the day before. 2 days before, which should have been 5 days, but don't tell anyone. And then rang them up the day before. They already had the document in front of them when I rang them up. This was Scottish, by the way, who are the main controlling authority for most of that area. And they basically just checked with the other guys who were involved, and jobs are good. And so that's kind of how it starts. There's quite a lot of planning involved. You can't just go, I reckon I could cross there, right? I'll call air traffic as I get up and then get a clearance across, and it's that ain't going to happen. So there's quite a bit of planning involved.
And aside from the paperwork, I know we spoke about this previously. I think it was on the Soaring Show. We're talking about your was it 1,000-kilometer flights? Just to give us a quick overview, what do you prepare for physically? What sort of kit do you bring to do any sort of water crossings?
Water crossings. To be honest, I don't even bother with life vests because I don't need them. The only way, really, you're going to end up in the water is if you hit something. the wings aren't going to fall off. You make sure that you're on a comfortable glide to for these water crossings. And we'll talk about one later on, which was definitely not a particularly comfortable glide, but when you do the maths, it's actually quite comfortable. But it really doesn't feel it. But anyway, so the jumping across to Northern Ireland, I think, Geoff, what height did we arrive over land? Something like 10,000 feet?
10,500, having set off from Snowdon area, 19,000.
Yeah, so even if you had horrendous sink all the way across, like you're going to make it. So if we're in a situation where I'm worried about needing life vests, then we ain't going in the first place.
I think it's important to get across that it is a completely safe thing to do, and without retracting what the achievement is, it's impressive to look at, but it's completely safe.
Yeah. So and people look at it and go, Jesus Christ, that's terrifying. And to be honest, when you're sat over the middle of that sea and you can't see land either side of you, like it's not a pleasant feeling. But the number, it's very safe, and because we're in controlled airspace as well, they're keeping the airliners well away from us. There's no other traffic that's in our way. They know exactly the block that we're operating in, so we're not going to hit anything, and the wings aren't just going to spontaneously fall off. And there's no clouds, so there's not going to be any ice. So it's pretty safe.
I'm excited to hear what Geoff has to say about what the experience is like for us mere mortals who have never attempted something like this. But should we get stuck in and talk about the flight then? I think now's probably a good time to have a look at it. Here is our flight. Here's what we're looking at.
All the forecasts were showing that in Northern Ireland they were going to have 8/8 cloud, about 3,000 foot cloud base, something like that, until about midday. So there's no point in us attempting to go across there until it was starting to clear, at least. So there's no point going any earlier. What we because I like to have a bit of fun first. Didn't bother just setting off at 11. We decided to get going early anyway, and then we did. There's a nice wave cross country run, which is what you can see between those points.
Yeah, the point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4.
Yeah, so we basically did. Although, to be honest, we fell out of this. I say we. It was all my fault. Fell out of the sky immediately at Corwin, which is basically just after the start. Fell out of the wave, and it was completely blue and very hard, and couldn't find the lift at that point. So we had to motor away and restart. But we did the rest of the task. So out of the 300 kilometer task, we did about 270, something like that, 280 kilometers. Okay. 270. So we did 270 kilometers before we even thought about going to Ireland, which was quite fun. And then what I thought was we'd do a quick 300 and then think about going up.
But as you do.
Yeah. But this is March in the UK we're talking about.
Yeah, but it's wave, isn't it? So
it's North Wales.
Yeah. So it was. I wanted to do a bit of distance first, and it tied in well with the weather in Northern Ireland, so we had time to do it. So that worked well.
Geoff, when did you find out you're going to Northern Ireland?
Well, I say I was on a South Down expedition to Denbigh, and I have flown with Chris before, I should say, and I did get my gold heights at Denbigh a few years ago. So yes, I already owe the gentleman a lot for that. But I just said if there's an opportunity to fly with him during the week, be great. And he said stand by. Tuesday might be a long day, and I didn't realise we were going to do the Corwin to Barmer Station run beforehand, just as a warm up. I did see the flight plan, which took us across to Northern Ireland and then back. And Chris said, yes, there will be a land out. And I thought, great, not sure where that's going to be. But so that was on the Sunday, and I think I was a bit of a nervous wreck for the next couple of days. And then word got out, and my friends in the South Down Club kindly gave me a last supper on Monday night, and the tug pilot for the week, who's also our member, Will Greenwood, said, "Don't forget to take your toothpaste and toothbrush and a change of undies," which I did, and so it was. Well, our leader, Doug Hilton, said to me, he said, just go for it. Just go for it. And my friend Craig Lowry, again, was very encouraging. So there was never going to be any doubt that I was going to get into the back of that Arcus. But it was interesting. But I've got complete faith in Chris, his abilities, and the Arcus. And, there was never a doubt. So.
Awesome. What was the Last Supper?
It was a very nice risotto, actually, prawn risotto, cooked by our chef James in our cottage, and it was very good. But needless to say, I didn't drink that much that night.
Oh, I got slaughtered. I was well pissed the next day, Geoff, honestly. I wouldn't dare do it anymore. Jesus Christ.
But no, so and my preparation, because I should say I've not done a solo 300 on my own. I've gotten gold height, and I have flown with Chris before, so I knew I did know what I was getting into, but I'd never had a really long flight like this. Maybe years ago, after you do your 5 hours or 6 hour flights maybe, but nothing like this, not nearly 9. And I was, I suppose, a little bit anxious about how I was going to feel. Was I going to get cold? I mean, we were above the freezing level for sort of 90% of the flight. I just wrapped myself up and stayed hydrated, took food, and made sure I was comfortable in the back, which I have to say, it was a very, very comfortable rear seat. So, yeah, recommend it.
Awesome.
Certainly is.
Okay, so you did your cheeky 300, wrapped up warm, and you finish your task. What's this? 8,000 feet, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And then the next step was to go north. So we had to climb at Barmouth there to get high enough to cross Snowdonia with enough height to not hit the hills and enough height to get into the wave on the other side of it. So that's what we were doing there. We were climbing up before we headed north.
And there you are, heading north.
And with a great hoofing tailwind, you don't lose very much height.
No. I wish it took ground speed, well, GPS speed, 80 knots, 90 knots, something like that. So, yeah.
So we were varying the speed depending on the varia, because we were finding lift and sink all the way across.
Okay.
And this is the point where I was getting a little bit frustrated. You can see we weren't really climbing very well here. And this is where I remembered, if you just hit pause probably there, this is where I remembered the wave forecast to be best. But what I usually do is I take a screenshot of RASP and where the hotspots are, so that if it is blue, then I know exactly where to go. And I forgot to do it here. Fortunately, when we got to this position, while Geoff was trying his best to get us up, I was trying to get signal on my phone, and I managed just to get enough phone signal to find out that where I wasn't as good as somewhere else. So if you hit play, and I think it was about this point, I went, oh, it's not here, it's over here. Right, here we go. And so we get to here, and can you see a vertical speed?
There it is, we're going up. If we look at
so I think we never saw less than about 7 knots on the Vario from that point. And so but when we were, I'll just hit pause there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so while we were climbing, we hadn't spoken to air traffic yet, and because I was, we're trying our best to climb away, and it was all a bit weak where we were, and then we went to that hot spot, and we were how high were we to begin with? 10,000 feet ish, something like that.
Yes, so yeah, 10,000, just 11,000, something like that.
Yeah, so we then connected with this lift. I think it was about 10 knots to begin with, and then it weakened off to about 8, something like that. And we didn't have very much time to then get in touch with air traffic and get our approval to head northwest, because of how strong the lift was. And annoyingly, even at 19, we stopped at 19,000 feet. They wanted us to have a 500-foot buffer between us and the airspace, which is fair enough, but they wouldn't let us above, annoyingly, because we were climbing really quite well, and it would have been nice to hit the 30,000 feet mark, but never mind. Anyway, so on the way up, we contacted Scottish, and they knew exactly what we wanted to do already because they got the documents in front of them, and we said, they said to us, when do you want to cross? And I think we were at that point at about 18 and a half or something, going, with off the clock lift, and we went, now please, and I don't think there was any pause. They just let us. They said, set off whenever you want. Now's fine, and crack on. Which
so
was
there
really
you are. So there you are, setting off.
So here we are, and this felt like a long, long, long time. So the whole way across, you can see the barograph is a bit rough. So we're flying slower in lift, faster in sync, and trying to maximise our glide all the way across.
Give it a bit more speed. So what are you feeling now then? I mean, especially Geoff, you've never done anything like this. You're seeing the sea ahead of you. What does that feel like as a glider pilot?
From that height, it was okay because you've got the performance. I knew I had no doubt we were going to get there. It was the coming back that I was unsure about, and you could just about make out Cumulus over on the Northern Ireland side.
It kind of looked similar to this, didn't it? Like we got like halfway across and we still couldn't see the land, and it was like this video where we got kind of past the halfway mark, and then we're like, "Ooh, we can finally see land! Thank God for that."
I mean, the sea crossing itself was 34 minutes, and it was like a final glide, and except you didn't want it to be your final glide. You wanted to have some height at the other end and hopefully some more wave to top up, because we still had a long way to go. But this crossing I don't think was a problem. I know it sounds very blasé to say that, but there was never any doubt that we were going to get to Northern Ireland. Whether we were going to come home again, yes.
That was a challenge.
What were the conditions like over the water?
We were still getting the effects of wave from Snowdonia. So I think we were basically the best bits, like halfway across the water, we were holding our height, and then we'd have like 3 knots down for a little bit, and then we could maintain height for a little bit. It's kind of like that, really.
Awesome. All right, then. So let's go back to the map view, and you are now in Ireland. What did you see? What were the conditions? Were they matching what the forecast was saying?
So my plan was always to go to this point where we stopped here to see what we could find, and then I had as a backup the up to the north where we went next. So we got here, and we were just sniffing around trying to find something better because we were generally holding our own. Some bits we were coming down, some bits we were climbing, and then we got the news that Scottish didn't want us to go above 10,000 feet, and we were at 10,000 feet. So there was absolutely no point us staying in that spot anymore because we were just wasting time. at this point, we spoke to Belfast, which is that circle in the middle, and we got handed over to those guys, and we said, look, we want to run basically due north. Are you happy with us going through your zone? And they just said, yeah, crack on, just do what you want and tell us what you're doing, and that'll be fine. So that was really, really, really convenient, because at this point, I could see we had a nice amount of height to get there, but if we had to deviate all the way around their zone, we may not be able to stay above cloud and in wave, and we might have to use thermals and ridges and stuff, which I really didn't want to do. So they were really, really good, and they let us do what we want, which was really good. So they let us through the zone to the north.
It was at this point that when Chris said, "Oh well, at least there's thermals along here," I said, "Well, if we're down in the thermals, we're not going home because we're never going to get back up again." So that was my assessment. So we really did need to stay high. And to be fair, Aldergrove were absolutely fantastic. I think they had a bit of a difficulty getting their head around a continuous descent profile, and but they were very accommodating, very accommodating.
That was going to be my next question, is because obviously the CAA knows your plans, and presumably they give some sort of briefing to people that this is going to be happening. But what were the controllers like? Did they know what was going to happen? Did they expect this? How did they react?
I think they were surprised still, but incredibly accommodating. They were so good, and I think they were intrigued as well. But yeah, it seemed like quite a bit of sky as well around here. They had one other aircraft that was buzzing around, and they were very eager not to let that other airplane anywhere near us. But it was very, very good. They were brilliant.
And I mean, they were still handling commercial traffic into Aldergrove, but the best place to be in that situation is right back on top of them at 6,000 feet. So we were out of their way. So in that respect, I think I think doing a crossing of the zone like this is, from bottom to the top there, it was probably the best way to do it.
And then so you've just crossed the airspace. You're getting a bit low, and I think all of us watching at home saw the trace, and you were in and out of OGN range, so you were appearing and disappearing. So what was going on here? Because I can see you're about 7,000 feet now, and still descending for a bit. So what's going on? What's the plan?
So as we were heading in this direction, so this area that we flew to was where I wanted to go. And we, as you can see, we're heading into a bit of a valley there, and we're soaring. We pick up some wave up ahead, and as we get there, we do start a climb, and I think it was quite good to begin with, wasn't it, Geoff? We were getting like 2 or 3 knots.
Yes.
Right here. Yeah. And then we kind of topped out, and basically, if we pause there, and then go to the other map, basically the next stage from this point is to get high enough, like as high as we physically can, to cross to Scotland, and so this first area that we come to, we take a climb, and we got to the point where it was like it's too marginal. So you can see us messing around in this spot up here. We climbed for a bit, and then we kind of topped out. And then we dropped downwind, which is a very unusual thing to do, but the hills downwind of this point were better wave generators, and you could see it on the ground as well. So we search around here, and despite there being good signs and the hills looking better, wasn't really working. So then we go downwind one more notch, where, like in this place, the hills that we're creating wave here, like, looked awesome on the ground, but just weren't really giving us much at all. So here we are at 7,000 feet. We'll just pause there because there's a little bit more talking involved.
Yeah.
We got to the point where we're getting a little bit late in the day, where we haven't got enough height because now we're further downwind and we've got a longer way to go than we did earlier. So we're in a worse position than we were at that first wave bar. We're now in a position where we go, right, we need to get to Scotland because I really, really, really don't want to land out in Northern Ireland. So I was me and Geoff were talking about this and the plan. So the plan that we came up with was basically we would run south down the coast as far as we could, remaining on glide to either Aldergrove or whatever the next one is next to it. Belfast City Airport, I think.
Yeah.
Remaining on glide for there, we would start the engine as close to the coast but as comfortable glide to get back to one of those airfields as we could, so that if the engine didn't work, then we go land at a nice airfield, and if it does work, then we motor across the water, climbing as high as we can as we go, so that at any point, if the engine stops, we can just come back the other way. So that was kind of the strategy at that point. But what we did was we went back to that first wave bar, and by some miracle, it was working higher than what it was earlier. Not by much.
It's slowly climbing, aren't you? And it's now 3:30. The cutoff when.
Well, it didn't get dark till like 6:30. I think sunset was 6:30. So.
So still 3 hours to go at this point.
Yeah, so we're still fine. So we managed to. Here we are at 7.6, 7.7.
We're 7.8, 7.9, and about to hit 8,000. No, you haven't.
So near enough 8,000. So, can you measure that distance
between?
Yeah, from coast to coast there, or that point, from the point we leave to the coast.
To there. That is 53 kilometers.
So yeah, not too far, but you've got basically the wind is southeasterly, southeasterly at this point. Yep. So we're going into a headwind, and going into a headwind when there's no lift and there's no landing options on the way isn't very fun. So what we did next was basically we set off with there's a turning point that I had, and it's a little airfield that if you put it's hard to say, a little bit inland, basically where that flat section is there, somewhere around there. Yeah. There's a little airfield a bit further right in the flat bit.
Yeah.
Around here.
South of it. That's it.
Yeah.
This bit here.
No, I think it's further north.
It's the one north.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Castle Kennedy.
That's it. So we had that on our moving maps, and we set off 800 feet above a 3-knot Macready to get to that airfield. So there's a bit of buffer in the way that that's further inland than the coast. And the 3-knot Macready is a Macready setting that I really trust on that LX9000, and I don't know how many times I've relied on it, but it works a treat. Anyway, so so the plan was we had enough height in theory to go across. However, neither of us were particularly comfortable with this. We wanted to be a lot higher, but we play the cards that we get dealt. So what we did was, as we were heading across, bearing in mind we're going into wind as well, if the numbers are getting worse, i.e. our arrival height is getting worse, then we will turn back when there is, while we've still got good height. If we set off and it looks better and better and better as we go, then we will commit to it and go for it. So there were options to come out of it. As we were heading across, that 800 foot turned into 900 feet, turned into 1,000 feet, and we were nursing lift on the way, and and flying quicker in sync. And I think it went eventually to what, 1,200-1,300 feet, Geoff, before we hit some wave.
Yes, I mean the technique Chris is explaining was what we've been using for the first crossing anyway. So certainly in the back seat, my focus of attention was really to see what that number was doing, and sort of urging it on to climb a little bit higher, because that was going to be our arrival height, either coming into Northern Ireland or coming back into Scotland. So that was the monitor point. It's when the Varia goes to 4 down that you think,
which is this point here.
Yeah, and that was really, I suppose for me, that was the oh dear moment. And are you going to talk about Aldergrove, what they'd offered us, Chris?
Oh yeah, we'll go back in. Oh, you go for it, Geoff.
All right then. So before we set off, we did have a conversation with Aldergrove, who, as we've said before, were really, really helpful and supportive. And our plan B, or sorry, it was actually a plan C, I think, because Chris has explained that, if we didn't get high enough, we would have taken an engine burn, albeit, the engine had been cold soaked for a few hours already. But the idea was that if we did start the crossing, we had to come back. Chris said to Aldergrove, "Can we come and land at your place, please?" And he said, "Are you declaring an emergency?" And we said, "No, but if the alternative is landing in a field or landing in your airport, I'd rather land at your airport." And he said, "Oh, let me talk to the airfield manager," as they do. And he went off and came back and said, "Yeah, that's fine. Belfast City, in fact, was probably going to be a bit closer if we were coming back from an abortive crossing. But yeah, that was fine." So again, these guys were right behind us, and that was really nice to have that that mitigation, should I say, in the back pocket. But yeah, 4 knots down, halfway across.
Yeah,
and the visibility. I should say that the visibility coming back was absolutely shocking. So we had really no sight of, even though it's only just over 50k, you couldn't see the other side, and you were looking down sun, and it was just haze. And there was
this is not the picture you saw.
Not until we got quite far along. I saw it before Geoff, but yeah, we got a long way across, and we were like, still can't see it. And there was no cloud as well. So when we were crossing to Ireland, there was cumulus clouds. So at least we could see roughly where it should be, but there were no clouds here. So when we set off, it's not ideal. What I wanted to go back on as well, it might be a discussion for later, but what Geoff mentioned about the engine. I can hear people listening to this going, "Oh, well, you got an engine, so yeah, great." When that engine is sat at minus 25 degrees and not getting above minus 10, that engine is a really, really cold engine. Are you gonna want to rely on that to get you out of the crap? No. And I've had issues in the past with cold engines, so I trust them 0%, which is why every time we've done an engine burn, we've been on glide to an airfield. Oh, apart from the very start of the field, start of the flight where we had a nice field. But there's no reliance on the engine, and I'm making the assumption that it doesn't work at all. So that's why we're planning it in a certain way.
So it sounds tense and there's a lot of decision making, but in reality, you were going to make it across one way or the other. So you always were going to make it back to land, and you had 3 or 4 different landing options.
Oh, sorry, yeah, we were never going to end up in the water. Christ.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, and what you're about to do here is, if you press play, you'll see. I think this is the 4 knots down, and then you know what happens after 4 knots down is
panic, brief panic.
And so here we are starting to climb, I think, here.
3.5.
Yeah, there it is. Going up.
So at this point, I turn across the wind a little bit, and then we basically do S turns here, and we've got a nice 4-knot climb. And if you hit pause here, Dorian, and go to the map, if you zoom out, and that wave is coming from the Isle of Man.
Okay.
So southeasterly wind. So there's no other place that can come from. That's where it's come from. So to find wave working that well, that far downwind, and the Isle of Man's not exactly a mega trigger. I know it can be a good trigger for wave. We, Geoff and I, we had those. I mean, we were talking throughout, but it was still quite tense, and to find that 4 knots and turn back, and we still had that 4 knots. We just erupted into laughter because, like that, the relief of being in a situation where it's that tense, even though you know it's going to be fine, and then to a point where you're finding wave completely in the blue over the middle of the sea, no idea it was there. It was just hilarious, and we were having a right good old giggle. Yeah.
I must admit, it went very quiet just prior to that. It was tense. You know, we had our mitigation, and we knew we were in. But you just the trouble on all of these glides is you just don't know what's going to lie ahead. And if we'd hit horrendous sink, then yes, we would have made landfall, but it would have been less comfortable, should we say?
Yeah. And yeah, I really didn't want to be in a position where we were having to use a field rather than an airfield to land at, or to fire up the engine over. I really wanted an airfield. So yeah.
Other than the obvious, any particular reason?
Well, I suppose we already had the trailer en route, but it's I've always done it really. If I'm flying cross country in the Arcus, I've got a turn point file on there that marks where all the airfields are. So if I know I'm getting low, and particularly if I know that I'm going to be falling out of the sky and I'm not going to stay up, then I'm going to find that airfield and I'm going to use that as a safe landing area. There's too many incidents and accidents with people who are damaging gliders in fields, and that Arcus is an expensive toy. So I don't want to be in that position. I want to use airfields. So yeah.
So before we get to Scotland, what was the plan if you ended up in Ireland? Did you have like an Airbnb that you picked out, or?
Well, I've got friends there, and funnily enough, one of them was messaging Matthew, and I think he said something like, "We've got a team of guys ready for you at Ulster Gliding Club if you do land there," because I think we were mooching around at 7,000 feet, not climbing at that point. So he was expecting some visitors. But so I had contacts there, so we would have been all right. And I have a sneaky suspicion there would have been an air tow across the water the next day. And it's probably worth talking about as we were getting across, when we were climbing at 4 knots in that position. I was assessing how much fuel we had and how far we had to go, because our super crew, Ian Molesworth, was already en route, but he didn't know where we were going to end up. So it was at this stage we're talking. Oh, by the way, we got told we weren't allowed to climb anymore there. So otherwise we would have stopped and climbed for longer. But we were still climbing nicely. So Ian was already en route north, and at this point we can. I know how much fuel we've got, and I thought that we should be able to make it to Carlisle, and it was a bit more marginal because of the fuel burn that we had at the very start of the flight. So that was not ideal. So we get to that first airstrip, and before we get to then, we asked Scottish to set us up at Carlisle, and I think their response was something like, their airfield is closing. They may still take you, but it'll cost you 50 quid as an out of hours thing. And I was thinking, I would rather pay the 50 quid and land there and spend a lot less time in the car, because by the time we land, we're going to be knackered and don't really want to spend another 2 hours in the car. And so it sounded a bit iffy, and it sounded like they couldn't really do it. So I rang up Ian. Did I ring? I think I rang him up. Yes, I did. And then so Geoff was climbing us away. I was speaking to Super Crew on the phone, and I said to him, "Look, they don't seem very happy with us. Please, can you ring them up and make sure that we can actually get out? They're not going to lock the gates on us or anything like that." So Ian had a phone call with them while he was on the drive, and he got back in touch. Said, "Yeah, we're all good. There'll be someone there waiting for us." And he told me his ETA, and I thought, "Oh, we're probably going to get there about the same time." So that was all good. And then we had to burn some fuel. So the first airfield was that one in front of us.
Castle Kennedy.
Yeah,
that one there.
Had there have been cloud, I'm confident we could have and if we had time, I'm confident we could have wave sawed the vast majority of the way there, because we're finding wave all the way along, whether it was sink or lift. But because it was blue and we were going kind of diagonal, we couldn't really stay in it. So I think here we're halfway through our first motor.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the engine worked, so we didn't have to land at Castle Kennedy. And then we put ourselves on a glide to get to Falgunzian. Is that how you say it?
Falgunnian.
There you go. And you can see it up ahead. So we glide here to Falgunnian. And it's one of those sites where you can't see it until you're really close. And we were like, is that it? Is that it? Not sure. So anyway, we put ourselves into a kind of circuit and fire up the engine a second time. So here we are. On that engine a second time.
Yeah, so 1,600 and 700 feet, so still plenty of height to do.
Yeah, we were in a comfortable circuit there.
I mean, we were once we'd had the climb over the sea, we knew we're in. We had a very good glide into Castle Kennedy. So the plan there was that we would actually go as far as we could past Castle Kennedy until we needed to try the engine. And then if the engine didn't work, we could go back and land at Castle Kennedy. But we knew that we'd be further down track towards Falgunnian, which was going to be our next burn point. So, all the time, I think we were trying to optimize our position relative to where we were going to do the engine, just in case it wasn't going to start. If it hadn't started at Falgunnian, we'd have just landed there, I think. But
I think the point, I know what the point you were heading towards, Geoff, was that we didn't have a huge amount of fuel. So we were, so that first one that Geoff mentioned, we went past it before we started the engine, because we needed to make sure that we had enough fuel to get to Carlisle, which is what my end goal was. Or our end goal was, because that was just off the M6 and it's a very convenient retrieve. So we motored to Falgunnian, motored up again, and as we're probably, I don't know, a quarter of the way across, the low fuel alarms going off on the ILEC in the engine instrument, and we get to a point where I think we're about 2,000 feet above a 3-knot Macready, and fuel was down on one litre, and we decided to shut the engine down there. So we had enough, and you could see we're passing Kirkbride Airfield, so that was the backup option if Carlisle didn't work. The controller was very enthusiastic initially, and then he went home for tea, so there was no one on the radio apart from an aircraft out of there on stalling exercises.
4,000 feet.
He didn't want to do any stalling below 4,000 feet, which we thought was quite amusing.
But the Carlisle controller was very helpful. He even told us the taxiway onto the apron that we should take, and Yeah, he again very welcoming from an air traffic point of view. We worked with Scottish Information for a brief point, and yeah, but the handovers were by and large very good and seamless.
Yeah, and what was fantastic was we had enough height, even running at high speed for that last bit. We had way too much height for the circuit, so we flew through the overhead. I'd have snooped, had a look down, see exactly where I want to touch down, exactly where we're going to come off the runway, and exactly where we're going to park. And as well as snooping all that, I could see behind the hangar there was a glider. There was Ian's car with the Arcus trailer, and he'd apparently just arrived as we got there. So that was brilliant. So as we taxied off the runway, he pulled up and met us. It was bloody brilliant.
That's perfect timing then.
Well, it
So
was.
you landed what? Just before 6. Well, 20 minutes to 6.
So yeah, we got it all in the trailer with light while it was still light. There's a manager there who was very kind to us. We used the facilities and off we went.
Okay, so you packed up the glider, and then how long was your drive home? Or did you stay the night somewhere on an Airbnb or something?
We stopped at a services, T-Base Services, and it's a really, really nice one, actually.
Yeah.
And so we stopped and we had pie, chips, and peas for the champions, and had a drink and then headed back. And I think we only spent about 2.5 hours on the road, something like that.
We were
And it's
back at the airport at 10 o'clock. Craig came and picked me up. Thank you. And yeah, back to our cottage in a scotch and a
debrief.
Yeah, it was a really easy run home. M6 all the way and then straight across. No traffic issues. It was really, really good.
Okay. So sorry, my cat decided to join us. She wouldn't leave the door alone, so there she is. It sounds like I think a lot of people get quite scared of talking to air traffic control, talking to the CA, talking to the BGA. And I think one of the things I wanted to point out from all of your expeditions is that everyone's always on board and wants to see cool things happen. I don't know if that's your experience. It seems to be that everyone seems to be very much on board. There's not like sabotaging and big no's and no, you couldn't possibly do that.
No, so I think air traffic controllers generally have an attitude where they kind of go, right, how can we help you? And how can we do this? How can we help everyone? How can we do it in a safe way? And I've had the tiny amount of issues with air traffic, and yeah, I'd like to say never have any issues, but it's generally if you ask them for clearance and you're transponder equipped and you're saying the right sort of thing and you're fitting in with what they want you to do, then you'll just get access to whatever you want, airspace wise. It's very, very rare that someone has said to me, "Oh no, sorry, you can't come through." Like that doesn't really happen. So, and I'd really, really encourage people to get transponders, speak to air traffic. You don't need like to have an excellent radio voice. You just tell them what you want, and if you can't understand them because they're talking too quick, ask them again, and they'll say it slower. And just communicate like you're talking across the table from them, and tell them what you want, where you are, blah blah blah. And the vast majority of the time they'll let you through bits of airspace, and it takes a bit of mental capacity when you don't do it very often, but when you get used to it, it's such a useful tool. Really, really good. The amount of people that like RAF bases and busy airports let me through their overhead in a bloody glider and stopping for thermals, like it's. You kind of think, oh well, that's never going to happen, but you'll be surprised. It's yeah, they're generally good, really good air traffic.
And I'm curious, what was the community response? Because obviously I saw your flight being posted everywhere, left, right, and centre. As I said, like there were group chats, there were messages, there were posts. The BGA were sharing it. I saw some powered aircraft channels as well posting about this crazy glider flight. What was the response like from the community?
Well,
I got a WhatsApp message from our club chairman who said that we'd gone viral on TikTok, and there'd been somebody who was obviously watching Flight Radar 24 and been monitoring, and they couldn't understand what this glider was doing coming across to Northern Ireland. So, yeah, it created a stir, I would say. Yeah.
At that point, Geoff sent me that video as well, and when I looked at it that night, it had 50,000 views on it, and I think we're into the hundreds of thousands of views for his little video. And what I really should read less comments because I get triggered very easily. But you read some of the comments from clueless idiots, and it's so frustrating sometimes, honestly. And it's like, some people who have done a bit of gliding, and they go, "Oh, he must have used his engine across there. He was in a powered glider." It's like, well, no. You think the engine's going to work at 20,000 feet? I don't think so. And anyway, so I unfortunately held back on comments, but yeah, it's although I think it was all really, really good publicity for gliding, and that sort of thing got shared by a powered pilot who clearly got lots of powered followers and aviation enthusiast followers. So just something a bit wacky like that should hopefully be really, really good publicity for us.
I think so. It should be good. And what was the experience like for you, Geoff? Like, because you said you were worried at the beginning about how long the flight's going to be, how you're going to cope. What was it? Did your fears come true, or?
No, I think I was really surprised how comfortable I felt at the end. I got out of the glider. Feet were a little bit tingly, but that's lack of circulation probably. But I was great. I was in, so I think the preparation paid off. I think the planning that Chris did obviously paid off, and the plan came together pretty much as well as it could. I've thought a lot about the day itself. Chris said at the beginning that the conditions were soft. I mean, when we were soaring between Corwin and Barmer Station, it was not great. My friend Craig was in his DG808 at the time, and he was struggling. The further west you went, it got better, but certainly around Corwin itself, it was very soft. And that sort of set the day up. The other thing we noticed with this southeasterly wave, and particularly with this high pressure system that we had last week, was the fact that the wavelength was very, very tight. You were right up against the sort of the edge of the trigger point, and it wasn't classic. It was hotspot to hotspot. You found a face on a hill that worked, and you just stuck with it and worked it. And funnily enough, when we got across to Ireland, it was exactly the same. Well, same air, I suppose, but it was certainly soft in terms of wave. Not a lot of indicators, a lot of wispy stuff, and that typified the day. It was hot spots, and it was some good climbs, and Snowdon was obviously memorable. But the day was good, very good.
And then I guess another question for you is: you said you haven't done your 300k yet. What's stopping you?
We did 2 of those in one flight.
Yeah. So what's been stopping you? What's the reason you haven't had a go yet?
Oh, I'm probably stuck in the tug too often.
Okay.
But I have just moved into a Duodiscus syndicate, so I'm hoping to do a little bit more. I had a DG 300 before this, and I did my gold height in that. But I think just the confidence of breaking those those bounds. So anyway, Chris helped me do that. That's for sure. On last Tuesday.
So that was going to be my next question: has this flight given you the confidence to go give it a go now?
This was a unique flight. Let's be clear about that. This was one of Chris's enterprising adventures, for which he is well known. So the pressure was not on me. The pressure was on Chris, and he did all the planning. He knew exactly what he was trying to do, and it was Chris's flight. But to come along for the ride for me was a flight of a lifetime, no question. And it's just reignited my enthusiasm for gliding, and to be able to do that with Chris was just an absolute joy and a pleasure. So thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Any advice, Chris, for people who want to do enterprising flights, who like to follow your footsteps and doing adventures far away?
Yeah, probably planning is probably the biggest thing, and particularly learn. I'm trying to pass the experiences from this flight to others, but it's different wave and thermal. But if you're doing something in places you've never really been to before, make sure you know exactly where the airfields are, because it might be that's where you need to land. And get Sky Demon on your phone as well. So I've got Sky Demon. It's a Powered Pilots app. So, for example, while we were going towards what I've forgotten already. What's that first airfield across into Scotland, Geoff?
Castle Kennedy.
Castle Kennedy. Now, I've got on the waypoint list on the LX 9000 Castle Kennedy. I know it's got an airfield. How do I find out how wide the runway is? How do I find out how long the runway is? Which runway direction is there? Oh, I've got Sky Demon. Boop, boop, boop. Have a look. Right, this is where we're going to land. This is where the runway is long enough. This is where it's wide enough. I know that they can take 20 meters because it says it in there. So all this is stuff that is already planned. It's not being left to the last minute and in hopes that you don't go, oh, I hope it's going to be all right. You've done a lot of homework and it's going to be fine because you've researched it. I can see aerial pictures of the airfield. I can see the state of the runway in the pictures. I can see all the details. I can read the pilot's notes of the airfield. All this, it's not, there's no luck involved. It's planning and setting yourself boundaries and limits and going, right, if this happens, i.e. if I start to fall off glide, right, what are you going to do? You need to have a backup plan, and that's anything in gliding, really. Have a backup plan, and never, ever put yourself in a position where you're relying on hope to get yourself out of the situation. I think that's probably preparation and have a plan. It's probably two good rules to live by.
I guess people watching this will probably think, well, of course, Chris has got an Arcus and it's got an engine, and therefore, that's going to make life a lot easier. And for sure, this glider has got legs, and it does go very, very well. But that's not to say that you couldn't do an enterprising flight in something with less performance and without an engine. And I know, Chris, you discussed this at the BGA conference with the idea of new ideas for competitions. And I think there are going to be limitations in terms of what you can do. For me, looking at this flight, it was the art of the possible. If you've got the right people, Chris, the right glider, yes, an Arcus, and the right day, well, we didn't have that, but certainly a task that was achievable, then you can do these things. But you have got to put things in perspective in terms of who you are, what you want to do, what the glider is, and the day itself, and take the day for what it is. Because without all of those ingredients, you're not going to get the full mix to make the day. But yeah, it was the fact that it came off, I think, was really, really satisfying. And it was a tremendous achievement. Tremendous achievement. Do 4 nations in one flight in a day. Yeah, definitely. But it was a long day.
Awesome. And then I think the one last thing I wanted to point out as well is the actual stats of the flight. Because what was the total distance?
We glide said something like 620k.
Yeah. Do you know what the speed was?
Oh, not very fast, crikey.
Yeah, average crew 72 knots.
We did the Barmouth station Corwin run at about 100 kph, I think.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of gliding there. I mean, obviously across the Irish Sea and back, and then across Aldergrove. So
there's a lot of hanging around in Northern Ireland, though. So if we, we weren't exactly going for a declared task and speed. So,
No, but the point I wanted to make is that 600 it's not easy, but it's very doable in older gliders as well. And 100 kph is also very doable in older gliders. So if you look at the stats and look at what people do every single day, the flight was definitely enterprising. It was very exciting. It looked cool, and crossing 4 nations in the day, as you say, is an absolutely amazing achievement. But you don't need an Arcus to do it.
No.
Well, I must say the crossing into Scotland, I am very glad we had the Arcus. If I was in, so for example, I always compare it, and I always I have these sorts of conversations with people. And they go, "Oh well, I bet you wouldn't do that without an engine." It's like, well, yeah, if I had crew like ready on the way, then yeah, I'd go for it. But I've got access to a 2-seater. Why would I take a single-seater and not take someone along for this experience? And it's more fun anyway. But yeah, doing the crossing into Ireland and it's at that height with that tailwind, like you could do that in a K8. Like it's a non-event. We arrived at 10,500 feet. That's we could have had the air brakes open all the way, and you still get there. But yeah, that crossing from Northern Ireland into Scotland, had I have been in, for example, the LS4, wouldn't have even set off. Maybe would have set off a little bit to see if I bumped into any lift, but there was no way I was going to leave glide of an airfield in Northern Ireland if I was in the LS4. So yeah, the performance does come in handy at times. But a lot of the time, the stuff that I do, you don't need that extra performance. That extra performance usually just means you get there quicker. You don't really get much more safety margin out of it unless you're going into a headwind, which I try not to make tasks into a headwind.
I think we also have to just bear in mind this flight was done purely on wave, so you can go further in wave than you will on a thermal day, and being able to top up to flight level 190. Okay, it would be nice to have gone a little bit higher, but that sort of does give you, something to work with, and I think that's what really got us round across to Ireland and round Ireland, even though we did have to top up, but they weren't huge top ups because, as we said before, the conditions were pretty soft over in Ireland, and but just enough to get back to Scotland. But yeah, you can do tremendous things in wave. I think that's the difference between doing this in March and doing it in the middle of the summer in the thermal conditions.
Okay.
And it was it kind of leads me to another thought where this flight, although quite a cool flight, that I knew that we weren't going to end up going that far, and where we got to was as far as I thought was possible, and funnily enough, is where it actually was possible to get to. We couldn't have gone any further. So this, I knew that it was going to be like that, and that was just a trial. I really wanted to learn how the controllers would take us, how the conditions would be in Northern Ireland, and the conditions matched what the forecast was saying, which was really quite nice. Even though we wanted it to be stronger, it was as forecast. So it gives us the confidence that on a better day where I can try and go for what I want to go for, gives me the confidence that if RASP or SkySight was saying that the wave's working well in Northern Ireland and we can get high enough in Wales to get there, then that'll give me the confidence to give this bigger flight a shot. And I know that air traffic will accommodate us because we've already done it. They've got the paperwork. They know how to handle this. So for me, it was despite it being a really cool flight, it was a trial, and I wanted to learn quite a lot, and I did. So it was a very successful trial.
Fully validated.
Yeah. So it was really, really good, and I'm really glad really glad we did it. And it opens up the door for the right sort of day to do something a bit more interesting.